Leftovers of what?
There's salad in bags.
There's one salad in a bag.
Half a salad. I ate half.
Oh, so we went from bags of salad to a half a salad in a bag. That's the leftovers.
There's some of that
Well, it depends on how you look at it.
macaroni and cheese yet. Okay.
Well, Mom said she was going to give some to the dogs, so I don't know.
And there was a lot. Mom bought 3 things of bagels.
Okay, that's not leftovers.
Well, no, it's fresh food. That'd be nice.
But somehow you went from there's lots of leftovers
Oh, there
to a half a bag of salad and
There's a cob of
bagels.
corn in there and some of the stuff we put on
I think there's some cans of beefaroni.
it. Cereal. I had a bagel for supper, just to start eating them up. Before we throw them
Where
out
did
for
she get
the-
these bagels from?
It's a giant. She shall never
You're
ever
on.
talk to me about spending $20 on tickets at the firehouse when I see what comes home in those bags.
So,
We got 3 minutes until we're live on the radio.
I think Mom's listening on Facebook, just so you know. Sorry, Mom. Said sorry, Mom.
Hopefully that music's not picking up.
I don't want to share this.
Huh?
Share this.
Never mind. Alright, we got 1 minute, and we're live on the radio.
I guess I gotta watch what the fuck I say.
We're on Facebook, Dad. We're live already. Can you not? Jesus Christ. Stop. I can't. I want to go home and eat bagels.
Eat bagels. You can have salad with it.
I'll put salad on the bagels. It's bagel salad.
There you go. 20 seconds will be live. Ten seconds. Everybody excited? Yeah!
Welcome to the Colossal Community Podcast on Colossal Radio. Heard the second and fourth Mondays of the month at 7. The opinions of this program are not necessarily that of Colossal Radio. Now, here's your hosts, Keith Hines and Lee Hancock.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Colossal Community Podcast. I am Keith, the Gentle Giant, and I'm joined here by my co-host, Seriously.
What up?
And we are broadcasting live from Off the Charts Music School on Delaware Avenue in Palmerton, Pennsylvania. And tonight we are taking time to remember 9/11. On September 11th, 2001, we said we would never forget And we're keeping our promise tonight by remembering 9/11 with a teacher's firsthand at how he had to break the news to the students and how he learned of the news and his side as a firefighter. And some part of the show we're going to hear from Doc on how it was when he was doing his show as a radio DJ back in 2001. And plus, Leanne and I will share our thoughts, and we'll tell you what was popular around 2001, around that time as well. So we'll get started. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So we'll take it. It was a Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. Sunny, blue sky, just a normal day at school, right?
Yes, it was.
And then 8:45 a.m. things changed. Run us through the day.
Well, the time when it first hit the television that they started broadcasting this, I actually didn't have a class in my room at that time. I taught industrial arts to 5th, 7th, and 8th graders. I didn't have a class at the time, and if I recall, I got a phone call from somebody on the staff that something was going on. I turned my television on, and of course I was fixated on the television screen, watching what was going on with disbelief. And at that time, I think there was only the one plane that was involved. So it really wasn't clear that this was any kind of a terrorist attack. It was just an accident that happened. As time went on, a class came in. Students had already heard about it. Of course, they were just as interested as I was in what was going on. We started watching the broadcast, and as time went on, the second plane went in. You had the plane that went into the Pentagon. You had Flight 93, all this stuff that was happening. Then, of course, they closed down the entire airspace over the United States. This all became, quite concerning to not just me, but the students as well. Rather than make up stories or try to explain something that I couldn't, we basically were mesmerized to the television the rest of the day. Now, I didn't have a classroom. There wasn't a classroom. I was kind of like jokingly in the basement. I was in the lower level. I didn't have a classroom across the hall or next to me, so I didn't really have any contact with any other staff, what was going on in the rest of the building. But it was obvious that the students were very concerned, worried. I'm sure some were scared, not knowing what was going on or why. So we just watched and tried to make some kind of sense of it.
Right.
It was difficult to do.
So is that basically the rest of the day everybody was just glued to the TV?
I'm pretty sure without knowing without knowing the rest of the school, what they were doing, I believe everybody was just watching what was going on.
Right.
In disbelief. Like I said, I'm sure there was a lot of fear, uncertainty. I had it. I'm sure the students had it.
Right.
So the images that were on the screen that day, I mean, even if we watch it now, we've seen it hundreds of times at this point. And every time I watch it, it still scares the crap out of me, to be honest with you. Like, it makes you sick to see people jumping and whatever. But so I was in the same building as my dad at the time. I was in 8th grade. I was upstairs in Mrs. Lapata's math class, and I can tell you, like, from my perspective, sitting there and watching it, we all were terrified, and it was not necessarily that we thought something was going to happen to us, but terrified, almost like you're watching a horror movie, but it's like, this is real, like this is really happening.
Right.
And we're not that far from New York City or Washington or what happened obviously in our own state. So you think to yourself, like, well, I mean, shit, it's like right here, like it's right in our backyard, basically, that this is happening. It's not like we're in California and we have no concept of New York City. Like, at that point, majority of the people that I went to school with, we've been to New York City. We know what it looks
Right.
like, you know. So what would you think? I know how my feelings on this, but as a teacher with kids in your classroom watching that stuff on television, do you think it was important or detrimental to those kids to see those images on television?
Well, I'm sure there's two edges to that sword. I'm sure there would be those people that would think that this was not appropriate for the kids to be watching this, especially maybe fifth graders.
Right.
Especially when you see people jumping off the top of a building and you see them falling. I can understand that, but at the same time, because I didn't have all the answers, to hide it from the students and make them even worry more, I thought it was more important for them to know the facts and see what was happening. And of course, there was no resolution to it at the moment.
Right.
But of course, then when the buildings collapsed, it even made the whole situation even worse. But I think there was a need for them to know and see and hear the truth.
Right.
Yeah.
When I was at work that day, and we don't have a radio on until lunchtime, and we really didn't know what was going on until we got home. I mean, my boss at that time, his wife called and said somebody bombed the World Trade Center, and that's all we knew. So I didn't know anything until 3:30 in the afternoon until I got home.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think as terrifying as it was for me in 8th grade to sit there and watch it, I'm glad I did. It gives you like a different perspective for me, like, to have seen it when it was happening. Not that it makes it any more or less real, but for me, I feel like it made it more impactful in a way. Like, well, whether we realize it or not, I think that day it changed us in some way, shape, or form. You know, like, no matter what beliefs you have or political positions you have on things or whatever, like, that day we were all kind of on the same playing field, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
And we all basically had the same impact. Like, you can't look at that day and not feel like, even all the time has passed, you can't look back on that day and not feel angry and sad and disgusted, and you know what I mean? And
Right.
It's important that you feel that way, because that's what makes change in the world, right?
Right.
Emotions and feelings, and you need to feel those things to make change, right?
Right.
Well, and there was really an element through the whole thing of absolute disbelief that, I mean, we were so complacent that things were so nice, and, you know, America was, you know, the land of the home, of the brave and the free and everything else. And all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, this is like possibly being taken away from us.
Right.
So there was certainly an amount of disbelief. I can tell you that the students in my class, while watching this, doesn't matter if it was a 5th grade or an 8th grade, it was dead silence. I mean, it was kind of like, wow, this is really happening,
Right.
you know, and what's going to happen next?
It's kind of like we learned about the Pearl Harbor attacks,
Mm-hmm.
and now these kids were living the terrorist attack, which we didn't know at that time, but
Yeah.
now these kids are learning about both Pearl Harbor and terrorist attacks. It's kind of weird how the history works out there. What was it like the rest of the week where there's talk about different theories that would happen, and did you have to like cut the conversations down because?
No, I don't recall a lot of conversation afterward. I mean, if there was conversation, I allowed it to happen. We talk about it if we needed to.
Right.
I mean, on the day when it was happening, I would probably even honestly tell you that there probably was even a student or two that was sitting there, praying, for whatever was happening. But afterward, I don't really recall a lot of conversation about it. Obviously, there was. And like I said, if it happened, I allowed it. They have to talk about it.
What was it like for you the rest of the week?
Well, there was a lot of talk actually, especially being in where we are, like, positioning wise on the East Coast, because, kids make funny assumptions. Maybe not funny, but I think sometimes you hear things from like parents at home, and,
Right.
and well, not some, you do hear stuff from parents at home, and then you just kind of repeat what you hear at home. So there was always like scuttle that week of, what if they attack like one of the power plants that are nearby, or you know what I mean? Like
Right.
we're so close to the fallout from that, and I don't know, there was definitely an element of like, this isn't over, like in the back of your mind.
Right. Yeah, right. You didn't know what was next.
Right. And mainly because very openly on the news, they didn't know what was next either, right? Like nobody knew, like, was this a once, like this is it, just that day? Is there other stuff planned? Like you don't know, right? So the fact that the people that should know everything don't know, I mean, that's terrifying in itself, right? So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely talk of, mostly, like, I remember talk of, like, if they hit a power plant around here, But, again, is that stuff that, like, kids heard at home? Like, what kids really thinking about?
Right.
A nearby power plant, right? But yeah, it was, I don't know, as a kid, it's difficult to kind of conceptualize what's going on. So you basically just absorb what everyone else is feeling, right? And what you're hearing at home, and like what the adults are saying, and then you kind of whisper down the alley, if you will, like in school. So I think we were all pretty scared for a while, for sure.
Right.
But I mean, we still had school all week.
Oh, yes.
We didn't.
We'll continue.
Yeah. We didn't get any days off or anything like that. I mean, it's not like it was COVID.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we didn't, but I don't necessarily recall that the administration took the teachers aside and coached us on what to say or what not to say. I don't think any of that occurred. If it did, they didn't include me.
Well, you're in the basement.
Yeah, I was in the basement.
Yeah, because like, how do you prepare for that? Like, what do you say? I mean, kids hear stuff on TV, like Leanne said, and are making stuff up, like, what? Because you have nothing to go off of.
Yeah.
Because you never had to do that before.
Well, and it's weird to see adults, especially like teachers that normally have like their shit together, right? Like not having their shit together. So like I remember when we were in math class, so I hate math, right? So I love Mrs. Lapata. Shout out to Mrs. Lapata. But I hated math class, right? So I remember someone came to the classroom door and pulled her out in the hallway, and she came back in, and you could just tell on her face, like she was always like very poised. She's a very poised woman. So when she came in, I could just tell on her face that like something's off, like what's going on, right? And then she turned on the television, and you're right, we're all just kind of staring at it, right? Like, what is this?
Right.
You know? And at first, like, without really knowing what actually was happening, you know, my first was like, oh, at least we're not doing math, right? You know, and then the longer it's on and you realize, like, oh my gosh, this is a real thing that's happening, like this, whatever. So then, because we did have the TV on when, like, it turned on after the first tower was hit, and we watched the second tower get hit live on television.
Oh, wow.
So, when that happened, you're like, what do you say to that? When you're just staring at the television, like, holy shit, like, this is real, like, this is really happening. Right. And, yeah, I don't even, there's really no words for it. Like, it's disgusting to see, like, looking back on it, it's disgusting that someone would do that.
Right.
You know, but, watching the second tower get hit live was absolutely, like I said, it's like watching a horror movie, but
right.
This is real life.
Real life, yeah, it's happening. Did she say anything to you at all?
I don't remember. It was very quiet. Like, for a middle school, the whole school was, like, dead silent.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
All day.
Wow.
Wow.
I mean, we're talking, like, even at lunchtime, right? Like, you're all just, like, in shock still a little bit. And a middle school cafeteria, silent,
Yeah,
come on now.
yeah,
like, that doesn't really happen. So, it was eerie in a way that normally there's, like, hustle and bustle and kids yelling and whatever all the time. And it was just, the whole school was dead silent the entire day. No matter what class, I mean, you still moved from class to class like you were supposed to, but we didn't do anything,
right.
Like, besides watch television screen, like, all day. Even after it was over, like, as far as, like, the attacks were over, we didn't know that. Like, you didn't know that it was over. So you're just, like, watching the screen because you don't know if something else is going to happen
right.
or whatever. It was a really weird day, and I think to some extent everybody, at least around here, remembers what they were doing that day.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like, but as a kid, like, everyone I've talked to remembers, like, whose classroom they were in when they first found out, like, how, like, the teacher reacted. What was, like, it's ingrained in you, like, that day, because it was just so messed up.
Right.
I mean, I hope nobody ever has to experience something like that ever again, but I don't know, it's, you can't really put it into words. It's creepy, you know?
Right.
I can picture the seat I was sitting in. Like, that's how like, ingrained it is in my day. Like, I can picture the seat in Mrs. Lapata's classroom, mainly because math overall was traumatizing for me. So I remember my math seat for sure in Algebra 2. So.
And it's interesting to hear in your perspective, because you were in school where the rest of us here, we were out in the workforce. I mean, I know you were in school teaching,
Yeah.
but, like, I was in my office building. I just walked out of the conference room and it was on the radio. So we just all started congregating in the front office area and listening as, you know, what was going on. And
Yeah.
so I know how I felt as an adult. I couldn't even imagine being in your shoes in a school as a student and just really not knowing what was going on.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go to a commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to get Bruce's side as a firefighter's point of view when we come back.
Look, who doesn't want to be camping? Think
Kind
about
of like the day the earth stood still.
using only
Yeah.
quality shampoos that are blow dry. They'll even do
In a
your
way, like
Make
Leanne
sure you're
said,
feeling
it put
great.
everybody
And
on the same level.
Executive Clippers and Palmerton. For 22 years, Stacy and Jennifer have been banqueting
For some
with
reason,
pets.
that'll stop
So
me
if you're
just to
looking for a
have it for
local
that
pet
day.
grooming service,
And the next day, it's
experienced
we
staff,
kind of start going back to semi-normal.
get your pets groomed and give them the care they deserve. Country Clippers in Palmerton. Find them online.
I know when, for
When it
us,
comes to the
where I was
Poconos,
working,
The Country Inn and Suites
When
by Carlson
Cleveland
is
down in
conveniently
Pennsylvania,
located in Lehighton,
my
PA,
boss,
right
my
off the
former
turnpike.
boss, she's like,
Located just right
go
so you
home.
can ski Blue
go home and be with
Mountain,
your family.
see historical
No,
Jennifer,
what? Like,
or
I'll
catch a
just
show
for the
at
rest
Prince
of the day.
Beach.
She's like, just go home
Unwind
and be
in
with
the
your
indoor
family.
pool,
Because
and
of course,
in the
we didn't
mornings,
know.
enjoy
We
the
didn't know what
complimentary
was gonna happen.
hot be-hour guest
You know,
breakfast.
it's
The
a
Country
shame
Inn
that
Suites Lehighton
it
and
takes something
Greenfield, PA. Located
as
right off of
nasty as that
I-476.
to bring
You're
everybody
home
together
away from home in the Poconos.
get everybody just to calm down.
They've become a solid member of the community in the past
Yeah,
5
exactly.
years.
Yeah,
They
it
take
shouldn't
pride in
take
the
something
quality,
like that
freshness,
to
and
get
variety
everybody
of
on
their
one
food.
page.
Yeah,
They're
but look at how
known for
divided
warm
we all are
customer
now.
service
Right?
and friendly staff.
You know?
Lunch,
And it's
specials,
because,
and
like,
fun food. It's Cindy's Deli.
as much
Located
as it
next
was
to Parker's Ice
impactful,
Stand in Franklin Township.
it's in the past,
Allow
right?
selection of
So
sandwiches and wraps.
it diminishes,
which are
that feeling
prepared
diminishes
fresh
over
daily.
time.
Cindy's
Right.
Deli in Franklin Township. Cindy's
Yeah,
Deli
it's
also
crazy.
provides full-service catering for corporate functions and other events, and they'll serve
All right, 10
each guest
seconds, so we'll
during
be
the
back.
length of your event. You gotta check out Cindy's Deli in Lehighton. Everything from lunch, specials, to catering, and so much more. Cindy's Deli in Franklin Township. Find them online at cindysdeli.com. Make sure to give them a like on Facebook.
All right, welcome back to Colossal Community Podcast. We are taking time tonight to remember the events that occurred on September 11th, 2001, and we have somebody that commented, and this was another thing that I was going to bring up, of how odd it was that not a single plane was in the sky that afternoon and evening after they stopped all the flights. That kind of was weird not to see anything in the sky. So now, we did have the point of view as a teacher and a student. Now we're going to ask Bruce his point of view as a firefighter, the firefighter side. What were you thinking when you saw those men and women go into the World Trade Center not knowing what was going on?
Well, there are just no words to express the courage that they had. Both the firefighters, the police, the Port Authority, anybody that was EMS that was involved in the whole situation. But I will say when it all came to an end with the buildings collapsing and whatever, it was not only sad and hurtful to realize that thousands of people, employees, workers, and people that just came in the building to do business were killed, but that so many firefighters and police that courageously went in there to do their thing, which is what they were trained to do, ended up being killed in that whole thing. It was devastating to even remotely conceive that these men and women would have basically given their lives to try to save somebody else, knowing full well when they went in there, there's a good chance they weren't coming out.
Right.
And I will tell you that after the event happened, I had a very, very strong desire to go to New York City and do something to help, to the point that I would have encouraged our fire department to pack up and head into New York City. The problem that came with that was there were so many volunteer firefighters and fire companies and paid companies that rushed into New York City to give assistance, that it was at the point where they had too many. They had no place to stage you. So it wouldn't have been, we would have been more in the way, so to speak, as being helpful, because they had whatever they needed, they had. But yeah, there was a strong desire to
What was
get
it
in there
like?
and help your brothers and sisters.
What was it like the next practice session? Did things change on how you did practice?
Well, there was a lot of discussion on, I guess you could say, looking over the situation that you're getting into, do a 360, it's in a building, don't just look at the front, look at all sides, see what's going on. There was a lot more urgency in being more aware of the situation you were being called to, rather than just rush in there and, end up being a casualty or creating more of a problem.
Right.
So there was a lot of emphasis on that training and overall perspective of the situation before you got involved in the response.
What was the reaction from fellow firefighters when you first met? Did you go to the station that night, or?
I don't remember if we gathered that night, but I do know we did have time to sit down and reflect on what had happened. And again, there was a desire on many of the firefighters from our company to get in New York and give a hand and to try to help. But again, there were so many people that were there already, it would have been logistically a nightmare. But the desire was burning in your chest to get there and help.
Right, yeah, exactly. I can imagine. What was your insight of knowing your dad's a volunteer firefighter and seeing these firefighters going in?
Well, even before this happened, let me take you back to Prince Manufacturing. So I don't know if anybody remembers that giant fire in Bonestown, right? So I don't remember how old I was at that point, maybe 10, I don't know, around there. When I was sitting in the house in Bonestown, looking out the window, Prince Manufacturing is like right outside the window, right? So you're watching this giant fire, it's giant flames, and like it's a paint pigment company, so eerily like the smoke was like purple and orange and whatever, and like I knew my dad was running into that building, right? And so I just stared out the window and cried because, as a kid, you're like, oh my gosh, like, is my dad gonna come home? Whatever. So then already I was very like attuned to the fact that my dad does things like run into fiery buildings, and it's scary, you want your dad to come home. Same thing happened when they got called out to Country Junction for the big fire. Like, again, like, you could see the flames for miles, right? So, knowing that my dad was there as well, possibly running into that building, that was terrifying, which we won't get into the fact that he didn't save the puppies, but anyway.
But he is safe.
Yes, but he is safe. So, that being said, like, when it comes to the thought of those firefighters and all the other crew and first responders that were there that day, like, those are somebody's parents. Like, that's somebody's family, right? And they gave up coming home to their kids to go try and save someone else, even though we can look back on it today and almost think, like, what were they going to do, right? Like, there was, I don't want to use the word pointless, it wasn't pointless, but it was like they were running into their death, and like, what could they really have done at that point? Like, they didn't know it at the time, but ultimately the building was coming down. Like, there was not much that they could have done to save it, right? Or save and whatever. So it did hit me, like, I don't know what it feels like to lose your parent in a situation like that, but I know the fear that you have of your parent being in a situation like that. So my heart always like went out to the families of those first responders, because I know it's part of their job technically, but like they didn't come home that day, you know,
Right.
and just like a lot of other people didn't go home that day, obviously, but like I said, knowing that that's something that my dad was involved in the past, like I can relate.
Right.
You know, imagine. So I'm sitting there in school watching this on television, like scared shitless, right? Imagine being a kid in school, knowing their dad was there,
Right.
running into that building.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, that's just like incomprehensible to me.
I thought it was interesting with one of the fire departments. They were actually, Discovery Channel was actually filming a documentary on them that day, and they showed up to a routine gas leak. And when they were clearing from that scene, they saw the first plane crash, and the fire chief said that was it for the rest of the day. Their day had changed, and they didn't even know it. I mean, that's just weird. You show up to a routine call, and then now you have this. I mean, and they also asked, when he asked his fellow firefighters to go up the stairs, did anybody refuse to go up? And he said, no, nobody refused. And like you said, that's what they do. That's they go in.
Well, and first responders, whether it's fire, police, ambulance, doesn't matter. First responders always run the risk of something bad happening.
Right.
And on occasions it does. Sometimes things just go south, and you can't control some things. But I think the element here is the magnitude, the number of people that were involved.
Right.
It wasn't just one or two firefighters or one or two ambulance or a couple dozen police. I mean, you're talking hundreds.
Yeah.
It's just almost unfathomable.
Right. Well, even ones that didn't go in the building, right? The ones that were just they were staged outside the building. When those towers went down, they had nowhere to go. Like,
Yeah.
but just like get rained on.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that in itself is like, I don't know, how do you just stand there and wait to die? You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
Like, but that's how the people in the towers felt too, right? The people trapped on the top, they knew they weren't getting out of there,
Right.
right? I can't imagine what it would feel like to have to make the decision, do I die in this building or do I jump off the top of this building and die when I hit the bottom?
Yeah.
Like, I can't imagine what goes through your mind when you have to make that decision.
I think any of us can.
Yeah.
Did training for firefighters change after that on how you pursue to go into a building?
No, it's pretty much standard, but if anything, there was more practice on those type of evolutions. Now that the training center is up in Nesquahoney, it's going to make it a lot better. Years ago, they had the tower there at Bear Memorial, so you had a little bit of an element of height and, exercising, ladder operations and what have you. But now with the new building, it's totally different. It's going to make it a lot easier for training. But and you can't stop training. And we talk about never forget 9/11, and I don't know that it's so much never forget the actual incident that occurred, but I think it's more, for me, it's more remembering the fact the courage that these people had and how the whole incident brought this country together so quickly. It's just unbelievable. It was just a total different, American flags were flying everywhere.
Right.
Now there are places you're not allowed to fly it. It's just a totally different situation, but I think remembering 9/11, it's important that we remember what these people did for us to help us and try to help us anyway. And that, and of course there's the issue with protecting the government, our country, homeland security and what have you. That's also important as well. But
Right.
I think we need to remember the sacrifices that were made and the fact that this whole thing actually drew the whole country together, even if it was only for a short time, but it was just a totally different country at that time.
Yeah.
Right.
It almost seems, in a way, that if we don't remember, especially if we don't remember what it was like for that time period afterwards, where you're right, like we were all united, yeah, and there's really no other way to say it, right? It's sad to think that can fall apart, like it's so fragile, right? That it didn't really take that long for things to fall back apart, right?
Right.
And it's almost like if we let that happen, if we let all the other convoluted crap get in the way of us being human, then these people died for nothing,
Right.
you know? At least that's the way I look at it.
Do you feel that we left our comfort zone down, that we're like, oh, this is never going to happen again? Is that?
I feel that way. I mean, I feel it, and even not necessarily from outside sources. I think like we're almost killing ourselves from the inside out at this point. You know what I mean? Like it's not even the terrorists we need to worry about. Like we hate our neighbors anymore. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous.
Right.
But yeah, I just if we don't remember what happened that day, and then subsequently what happened after that, and we stop letting that affect us in positive ways, then like I said, all those people died for nothing.
Right.
You know?
Have you been to Ground Zero?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that because we had taken a friend of Leanne's to New York City, and one of the things we went to was Ground Zero and the fountains that were there. And just like the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., for those that have been there, it's such a spooky thing. Well, it's kind of the same thing at Ground Zero. And I'm not ashamed to say that when I got there and I just touched the names that were engraved, and I cried.
Right.
It's just so moving.
Yeah, I cried.
To think that these people not only sacrificed these, because most of these people didn't have a choice.
Right.
It wasn't, I mean, we have the brave firemen and EMTs that went in there and did their thing, but there are a lot of people in there that just were going to work, you know, and never expected anything like this, but and they had to suffer such a cost was made.
Yeah. Well, and so the friend he was talking about that we brought, he's a friend of mine. He's actually from Scotland, and he was over here visiting for what, a couple weeks he was there, or he stayed with us or whatever. And so he's not even from here, right?
Right.
And we kind of forget that this impacted the whole world, right? Like this stuff like this just doesn't happen, you know, like in most countries.
Right.
So when he was here, when we went to Ground Zero, like his name's Ewan, he cried too, because it impacted the entire world to watch that, like to watch the horror of what happened that day. So it was also interesting to see someone that, like, this isn't their country.
Right.
These weren't fellow citizens of his. He was on the other side of the world when this happened, but he stood there like where people died, and he just cried. You know, like I think the whole world cried with us.
Right.
Because hate us or like us, like what happened that day was like horrific.
Right.
You know, so.
right on a lighter note of things, what was popular back that week of 2001, September 7th, the movie The Musketeers premiered. I don't remember that movie.
I don't either. I don't think anybody remembers any pop culture from that week.
Musketeers or Three Musketeers?
This says The Musketeers. That's all. Zoolander, Hardball,
I do like
Glitter,
Zoolander.
and The Glass House also came out that week.
I do like Zoolander, I'm not gonna lie.
And TV shows that were popular that year, that fall, was Smallville, Scrubs, 24, Reba, The Office, and Lizzie McGuire.
24 was my jam.
Yeah,
24.
Yeah. Which I feel like evolved from what happened, maybe, because like maybe not the show initially, but that whole show was about terrorist attacks.
Well, yeah, because he was the sole survivor, yeah.
Yeah.
And popular songs that year was Fallen by Alicia Keys, You Got It Bad by Usher, All For You by Janet Jackson, Pop by NSYNC, and I'm Just Gonna Talk About You Tonight by Toby Keith.
So, good year for TV, bad year for music.
Yeah.
Because those songs suck.
That's pretty direct.
Yeah. So how did that event change your life afterwards? Were you like, okay, I'm not gonna, all this stuff on my bucket list, I'm now gonna go and achieve, or how did that all happen?
No, not really. If anything, there was a renewed emphasis on, the fire company, and I think, thinking back, it probably was a time when recruitment might have been a lot easier for fire companies,
Right.
getting volunteers. I certainly know the military got an advantage with recruitment
Right.
at that time.
Because we were all
But
so mad.
Yeah, everybody wanted to shoot the coop, so to speak. But anyway, no, I can't say that because of that I kind of decided I'm going to do stuff and take care of things that I hadn't done before. The whole thing was kind of like shocking.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
I mean, it took days to kind of comprehend
right.
the fact that this even happened. I haven't been out to the Flight 93 memorial yet. We plan on doing that in October. Haven't been out there for that yet, but even that, when you think about what those people did on the airplane,
Yeah.
they knew
Yeah.
that they weren't going home.
Right.
But yet at the same time, they were patriotic enough to stand up and try to get something stopped
Right.
before something worse happened.
That's some of the most impactful stuff for me, is the hearing that dialogue from Flight 93,
Right.
and then hearing phone calls that people made home,
Right.
right? Like that, I'm a very auditory person, so like hearing those people's voices and like what they had to say in their last moments is like gut wrenching.
Right.
Like there's nothing else for me from that day that's more like makes me want to vomit than hearing these people say goodbye.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I didn't really expand a bucket list in 8th grade, but I will tell you that I definitely became more patriotic that day. Like, I was ready to go fight some
Right.
people, you know? I think we were all like this weird mix of like shock and awe and sad and disgusted, but I think overwhelmingly people were pissed. You know, like, it's kind of like you come over on our home turf, like, get out of here.
Right.
You know, like, I think everyone was just ready to just like bomb the shit out of the rest of the world, right? Like, stay the hell away from us.
Right.
So I think for me, I was more like like, this is America, and we're gonna kill you now.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't come over here and do this and think that you're gonna make it out of this. Like, I think we were all just so mad.
You know, and I sometimes wonder, like those folks on the plane that took it upon themselves to stop something worse from happening.
Right.
I often wonder how many people today would do that. I mean, with the way the country is so divided and so opinionated and whatever you want to call it, I just wonder sometimes. You know, even recruitment in the military is down.
Right.
It's like there's really no, I don't know, patriotism like it used to be, so
Right.
to speak. But I often wonder how many other people would, you know, take the initiative to.
Yeah. Well, even that day, like, was it just like the right combination of people on that plane to do that? Like, is it really the time in our country where that happened, or was it just like they just had a bunch of like good people that were like, we're not gonna let this happen, right?
I think it's probably more of the time back then, because like we were more patriotic. We honored the military and stuff like that. I think the time was just different.
Yeah. I will say that I think ultimately our how we view our first responders, especially since that day, has changed. One thing I've noticed, so my dad being a firefighter, whenever I travel, he collects patches from different fire companies, right? So when I travel, especially like outside the U.S., I make sure that I get a patch for him somewhere. And like particularly over in Europe, they're paid firefighters, like it's their job or whatever, but they've already told me in other countries that like over there they don't get like glorified like our first responders do, right? It's just like to them being a firefighter over in that country is basically the equivalent of just having like some Joe Schmo job, right? So they are actually almost envious of American first responders because of how high regard we pay them, and how much respect we give them for what they do. So it's always interesting too to, like I said, hear from other first responders from other countries and how they're just kind of like, I don't know, like they rip patches off their chest to give to me because nobody over there comes and asks for a patch, right? Like that's not a thing for them.
Yeah.
So like when very few people come over and ask for a patch, they'll just rip one right off their uniform and hand it to you.
And that's something we assumed everybody does.
Right, but it's not. Like in other countries, like firefighters, police officers, like they're just like any other person, you know?
Right.
So.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
Has recruitment for firefighters, has it gone down or is it normal?
You mean lately?
Yeah, lately.
That could be a yes or a no because there have been grants given to some fire companies purposely for recruitment and retention, so that has helped them. Now, I'm with Bowmanstown. It's just a small rural fire department. We don't have the size of a community to recruit a lot of people from.
Right.
So we're kind of limited on our ability to recruit. We had people, we just had a young fella just within the last couple of weeks join our ranks. But it's not like, you know, you can put the word out there and you like, it's not like you know that in your community there are at least 40 people who could be firefighters,
right.
You know, whatever. We don't have that. So I can't really speak, you know, to bigger communities like Pomerton, Lehigh, and Allentown type of thing. But there's definitely an interest, and a lot of it has to do with because, as it was said, first responders are revered a lot more positively today, respected a lot more, especially the volunteer. When you get a call at 2 in the morning, and it's raining out or it's snowing, who shows up?
Right.
Who wants to show up? Type of thing.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a commercial break and we'll see if we can get the doc going really quick and then we'll wrap things up.
Look, who doesn't want to be pampered?
I always find it interesting when you hear the stories of the people
Let a blow
who
dry.
their alarm clock didn't go off that morning,
Make sure you
so
flow
they
it.
were late for work, or they're
It's got
something with their kid, they had to go back home, just
Stacy and Jennifer have been pampering you best.
for whatever reason, they weren't meant to be there,
Yeah.
but they should have been.
It's not
Like,
happening.
I can't imagine the feeling those people have.
Yeah, survivor's guilt.
Yeah, exactly, like,
Well, here's
why
a
that,
weird one.
you know?
When I woke up this
Want to come
morning,
to the
well,
Poconos?
they'll tell you how
The
late I
Country
sleep.
Inn and Suites
When I woke up this morning, I rolled over, I looked at the clock, and said
right
9:11.
off the turnpike.
Oh, wow.
Located just right so you can
Wow.
ski Blue Mountain, see historical Jim Thorpe, or catch a show at Penn
They're
Peak.
on our way down here.
Unwind in the indoor
Keep-
pool,
keep
and in
trying
the
to
mornings,
picture them
enjoy the
turn out.
complimentary hot
There was a
8-hour guest
partial
breakfast.
rainbow.
The Country Inn and Suites Lee
I
Hackney
coming
and Jim
into
Thorpe,
town, I said, oh, I
PA,
wish I
located
could've
right off of
got over like where
I-476,
the welcome to
your
Florence
home away
sign
from
is,
home in the
because the
Poconos.
flag was just hanging, there's no wind, but where
They've
the
been
flag
a
was
solid
just
member of the
hanging,
community in the
and the
past
way
5
the
years.
clouds
They
and
take
this
pride in
rainbow,
the
like,
quality,
it would have been
freshness, and
incredible
variety.
picture, but
Yeah.
there was no way to get it, but it was just, just kind of crazy, it's like, it wasn't raining,
specials,
but
and
there was
fun
this
food.
partial rainbow.
Cindy's
First of
Deli,
all, it was a
located
prison.
next to Piper's
Yeah.
Ice Dam
You could
in
see part
Franklin
of the
Township.
large.
A wide selection of sandwiches and wraps, which are prepared fresh daily. Cindy's Deli in Franklin Township. Cindy's Deli also provides
Just call
full-service
it.
catering for corporate functions and other events, and they'll serve each guest during the length of your event. You gotta check out Cindy's Deli.
10 seconds to move
Everything from lunch, specials, to catering, and so much more. Cindy's Deli in Franklin Township. Find them online at cindysdeli.com. Make sure to give them a like on Facebook.
All right, welcome back to Colossal Community Podcast. Tonight's show is a little bit different. We took time to remember 9/11 and all the events that occurred, and it was Leanne's idea to do this show. And any final thoughts here?
Not anything that already hasn't been said. I think it's just really important that we don't look at the whole never forget thing as just the sad part. We look at the never forget as the positiveness that did come out of it, and we, like I said, don't let these people have died for nothing.
Right.
So,
Bruce, do you have any closing remarks at all?
Well, I would just say that my prayers will always be with the surviving family. The husbands that didn't come home, wives didn't come home, children that didn't come home. It's just almost unfathomable. But again, I agree. We have to remember it's tough sometimes to find the positive that comes out of something like this, but we need to find it and be confident that something positive did come out of it.
yeah.
All right, I think we're going to get the doc here on really quick. While we're waiting for that, make sure you tune in tomorrow at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. for Oldies with Ike. He, I guess, is doing a show with Best of the Motown.
Oh, okay.
Motown. I think he's calling here. Hold on.
Or maybe not.
He's giving me instructions. Put the phone in front of the microphone. And here he is. Hello, sir.
Put on speaker.
Hold on. How do you put it on speaker?
Well, it's in South.
Hello?
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you just fine.
All right. As you know, tonight we were taking time to remember 9/11, and we got the story of the insight of a teacher and a firefighter. But we wanted to get the input of a radio DJ. What was it like
Radio
that?
DJ? Yeah, get her a radio DJ. I'll tell you what, I want to thank Leanne's dad. Listening to the interview, it was well done. I think you both did a great job as well. We were just sitting here, I've been running all day and got home, and we were actually trying to have a little dinner finally, and listening to you guys. But my perspective was I was doing a morning show, and from 5:30 till 10. It was at 105.5 22 years ago. And it was the first time I experienced everything in a radio station. There's emergency lighting that goes off when something is on a federal level, just to give you a perspective from a radio station point of view. And back in the day, they had the AP wire. Everything is a little different now, obviously, with the technology. But the point being, when everything was starting to happen, just as your guest said as well, like it was hard to fathom. Nobody knew what was going on in the beginning, and nor did I. I mean, I was on the morning show, and we have TVs. The TV was on in both studios, and it just all started unfolding, and it was very surreal. And my morning show went from 5:30 till 10, and I was on the air till almost 5 o'clock that day. And as I was being the mouth, if you would, for everybody's ears, you know, that had to work. I mean, they weren't doing much working, but I was their outlet with people that were working. And again, it was very surreal. The biggest story, and I told this this morning when I was on the radio for the past 22 years, and I've told this story. You were reporting, doing what I had to do. I was being fed all the news information as we were receiving it to broadcast it, getting it out to our listeners, and you didn't have a chance to really react. It was, you had a job to do, and you did this job, and again, it was horrible. And I got done with the 12-hour shift. I couldn't go any longer. I went till 5. I could have left earlier, but you just I became part of the entire day. And I remember, as soon as I got off the air, like emotionally it set in. And I started to like weep a little then. And when I got home, and I finally sat down, and of course, as we all did in front of the television, I cried uncontrollably. You like the emotions came out that you could not stop. Like it was just, what is going on with our world? What has just happened? And I just remember just crying, and it was just you just couldn't. I couldn't stop. But for the 12 hours that I was on the radio, and from 8:45, 8:48, it just from then on till 5 o'clock, again, it was a reaction. So that was my recollection. Just emotionally drained. I didn't feel that tired when I was on the air. And I could only fathom what broadcasters on TV were all feeling as well, because I lived it with them to some degree, and it was just, you know, I never want to have to relive it again. That's for sure.
Right.
But that's what I remember, Keith, Leanne. That's what I remember is just emotionally drained and not being able to really get in touch with your feelings. Like so many others, you couldn't sit there on the air and say, "Oh my God, I don't think we turned the mic off a dozen times within those 12 hours. It was just more information as we got it, more information." And I also had a co-host, and then I also had the general manager of the station as well. His name was Bill Lakatos, no longer with us, but one of my very first friends in radio back in 1982 in the Lehigh Valley. And that's what I remember most, being totally drained, not being able to show really too much emotion. You were there to do a job, and that job that we did after it was over, it was awful, really. I mean, it was emotional for sure.
Right. All right. Thank you for taking the time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, I know we're probably running a little late, but you know the boss, so it's like fine. I mean, nobody's gonna say anything to you.
Yeah, right, boss. Leanne's still waiting for the meeting, you know.
Yeah, I know, but we'll get there. I know. Tell me we're getting coffee as well. We'll get that meeting together. Actually, we're gonna have a really cool space where we're gonna have this meeting, and I made a lot of headway today. That's why we did the show from home today, actually, and we were here, and it worked out pretty well. But we're gonna have our own space where I have enough room for everybody. That'd be pretty nice. But you tell Leanne just to hang in there. You hang in there, Leanne.
I'm hanging.
Oh, man. Listen, job well done on the show today, and yes, it was stellar. Certainly, feeling what people in that position went through, which I thought the radio job was hard, but their job was certainly a lot harder. And God bless them, and give it up for our frontline people every day. So great job tonight, guys, and we'll catch up with you real soon.
All right. Thanks again.
You bet, buddy. See you later.
See ya.
Bye.
All right.
You want to breeze through the last couple things?
This was the first show that we did as a 9/11, because that's the way our show fell, but I think it was good.
Yeah.
For a first one, and probably many down the road, and
Yeah.
there's
Well-
lots of stories out there that haven't been told yet,
Yeah.
and hopefully we can cover those stories and get more people to tell their stories, because like Stacey was saying, people were late for work and
Right.
people didn't go to work. So
Yeah.
anything else with you?
Well, that's it. Just God bless America.
Our next episode will be September 25th, and we're going to get back into the fall fun, talking about corn mazes and a whole bunch of other things. So tune in next time. Tomorrow, Doc will be on from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then Wednesday, Doc and the Cage Show will be back on from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. So stay tuned for that. And don't forget, tomorrow night, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., Oldies with Ike, the best of Motown music.
We hope you enjoyed tonight's Colossal Community Podcast with your